For Baulkham Hills.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise tonight to pay tribute to the Royal Australian Air Force, who recently commemorated 100 years of service to our nation. It was an occasion marked with a spectacular flyover and the presentation of the new Queen's colour, embodying service traditions, achievements and the distinguished history of our RAAF. As a former captain in the Australian Army, it's an honour to stand at this place and reflect on the history of the RAAF and its 350,000 past and present members who have made an invaluable contribution to the force and to our nation. Mr Speaker, just over a century ago, the Royal Australian Air Force was established after an agreement was made at the 1911 Imperial Conference to adopt air power as a central pillar of Empire defence. While the main territories of the Empire agreed to adopt air power, only Australia implemented an action plan to make it happen. The Central Flying School was established at Point Cook as the first step in building air power through the Army Australian Flying Corps. In World War II, about 5,000 served in the Australian Flying Corps in Palestine and the Western Front, and many others served in the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Navy Air Service. A notable first for Australian air power was the first ship-launched air-to-air engagement. Her Majesty's Australian ship, the HMAS Sydney, was on patrol in the North Sea when it came under attack from a flight of German fighters. Quickly launching the ship's fighter, it engaged a pair of German aircraft and fought them off. The Royal Air Force was formed on the 1st of April 1918 from the Royal Flying Corps, and the much larger Royal Naval Australian Air Service adopted Army enlisted ranks and naval officer ranks. Following the British example, Australia reformed the Australian Air Force, the AFC, as there was not a naval air service therefore into the RAAF. In the post-World War I era and the Depression, the expansion of the Air Force was severely constrained until the late 1930s, when rearmament against the growing fascist threat became a necessity. Mr Speaker, from 1939 to 1945, the Royal Australian Air Force went through a remarkable expansion from being a barely credible air force to the fourth largest air force with operations around the globe. Following the end of World War II, the Air Force returned to a more sustainable size and was the first to fight in Korea. 77 Squadron flew in a day from the British Commonwealth Occupational Force in Japan to the Pusan perimeter, the first non-American force to arrive to push back the communist assault, dropping bombs as P-51 Mustangs took off from the airfield. As the Cold War became more intense in the 1950s and 60s, the Air Force became vital for security in Southeast Asia and opposing communist expansion on a number of fronts. The Air Force evolved into a high-tech force, employing the most advanced aircraft and weaponry, from the iconic F-111 bomber to the ubiquitous C-130 Hercules and the Vietnam workhorse, the UH-1H Iroquois helicopter. The Air Force returned to combat operations in the Middle East in the 2000s, including numerous aircraft in the fight against ISIL and Iraq. I also might add, Mr Acting Speaker, that the Air Force, through the C-130, flew Minister Roberts and I in and out of Bougainville in 2000 and 2001 respectively. All these missions our Air Force achieved, displaying the highest standards of airmanship and operational excellence which our nation should be extremely proud of. Today's Air Force is on the pathway to becoming the world's first all-fifth generation Air Force, a modern high technology enterprise adopting the latest capabilities from around the world. Mr Speaker, the advanced supporting aircraft are already in place. The tankers, the airborne control aircraft, patrol and anti-submarine bombers, the MQ-4 Triton drones and the essential airlift fleet of the C-117s, the C-130s and the C-27s. Combined with long-range radars, strategic intelligence and extensive contractor logistics and maintenance support, the Royal Australian Air Force is well placed to cater for the growing strategic challenges in our region, and here's to another 100 years.
Are there any private member statements?